Or, I mean, because Watson Code Assistant is important for a lot of, it's quite a sort of flagship IBM product, sort of helping with modernization of people's COBOL artifacts in particular, whether they're on a journey towards replace it with perhaps a Java stack, or perhaps just understand what the heck is going on, because it's undocumented, use of AI documentation, or move towards perhaps some refactoring, putting in some microservices, or using some sort of more modern commands, because it was written for a very old version of COBOL, and with the newer versions, newer compilers, there's a bit more tricks to play. And you've got a huge insight in that because you've been working with clients. I don't know, we can
Well,
have a discussion about Watson Code Assistant.
well, this obviously we have to change your discussion because of the circumstances. But yeah, so I think the challenge I had with Watson Code Assistant, to be very frank about it, is we came out with this product and put a lot of focus on transform. And
So what do you mean? So just play this back. I'm playing the sort of talk show host here. By transform, do you mean transform from one language to another, like COBOL
yeah,
to
yeah,
Java? This kind of alchemist, this sort of magic
from
kind of
yeah,
led to gold. Okay.
COBOL to Java.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I personally had an issue with that. Because yeah, I just felt like there was we want to. I'm very passionate about the mainframe. I'm sure a lot of these people before are. And for me, I wanted to tell a better story. You know, I'm working with a worldwide team, and we are tasked to build a lot of assets around what's code assistant and DevOps. My specific focus is DevOps. And yeah, I just didn't want to tell a story that could potentially mislead a client to think that if you move from COBOL to Java, then that is going to fix all your problems. Because to me,
Yeah.
that's
So can I quiz you a little bit on that? Why do you think
oh,
there was this big rush of COBOL to Java? So I'm going to throw a couple of things. I'd be interested to hear what you say.
yeah.
One of them, I know COBOL is charged. It forms part of your monthly license fee charge, or however you bought that. So basically, you're paying for your miles, you're paying for your MIT. Whereas Java can be offloaded. So I think that was a kind of rainbow that people thought would give them benefit. And obviously, from a skills point of view, people think that, well, you can hire more Java people more cheaply across the world than COBOL, which is a kind of dying craft. Do you think either of those two are incorrect, or do you think that Java just simply is not as performant on IBM Z as COBOL, and COBOL is? I'd be curious as to what you saw in that.
Um, I think for me, it was just that I just don't believe in the story, the whole skills discussion. I just don't know if you move an entire COBOL Pro application that has a profile where it needs to be high transactional, you need to have fast response times.
Mm-hmm.
If I move that to Java, am I really going to still have that same profile? Am I going to be able to meet those, requirements to satisfy my clients? And I just didn't feel it was black and white as that. I think there's sometimes a good time to run Java on the Z, and I think there's
Mm-hmm.
sometimes good times to run Java on x86, and I think there's sometimes good times to run Java on leave your COBOL application on the mainframe.
Cool.
Now, I think that's the power of the mainframe, if I'm honest, is that we can run COBOL, we can run Java, we can run Go, we can run Python. We've got all these opportunities to run these different languages, and I don't have to get off the platform to do that. And I think that's magical, personally.
And
So
does that resonate with the customers? So what you're going to tell us next is a sort of transformation from this kind of, IBM was selling this kind of like alchemist sort of magic spell. It didn't quite work. It obviously doesn't resonate with what your belief was. Was that what you were hearing from customers as well when you went out with sort of version one Code Assistant? They were saying,
no. So my I've got my colleague Roberto Calderon. He focuses on what's code assistant, and I think the challenge we have is that we've got a lot of clients that look to us for leadership. And I think the challenge is if we don't be more prescriptive in how we demo, how we talk to clients about these tools, they will just go on their own train of thought, and sometimes that might be down the right train of thought, sometimes the wrong one.
Okay.
And I feel, if I'm going to be completely honest, I think we left that whole transform thing quite open, right? And I think sadly that led clients to think, oh, I can move COBOL to Java and everything will be smooth. And I don't think that's necessarily true. So I think clients unfortunately had the wrong impression. Some clients didn't. Some clients knew that sometimes there's a good time to run Java into some workloads, and a good time to run COBOL in other workloads. But the asset that I built, which is I would have loved to show to this call, but I don't have it ready to go. But the asset that I built with a colleague of mine, Steve Foley, we showed a nice story where actually in this huge COBOL program, there's some aspects of it that actually is better suited in Java, right? So we're going to refactor that logic out. We're going to transform that to Java, and then we're going to integrate that back into the transaction. So for example, if I want to do XML processing in COBOL, that's going to take me a long time to do that. Whereas if I did that in Java, it's easy, very much easier. So I want to leverage the power of the box to choose what's the right work, and that's the story we're now telling. And you can argue maybe it's a year late or so, but I think as anything in life, we release it, especially in companies like as big as IBM, we release things and we evolve, and we want to now tell the up-to-date story.
So it sounds like what you've gone and done is you've transformed. By the way, Atul, you just joined. So this has changed very quickly from just a discussion about COBOL Java migration transformation, because for a number of reasons, JTA is not quite ready to present. So Stuart's asked a question. Stuart, you want to be co-host? Of course you can. I'm just going to unmute you. Make co-host. I assume Stuart's got a question.
No, I was actually going to weigh in with the use case that Joe just said of refactoring a monolithic bit of COBOL and making the right bit of it Java, and the fact that COBOL and Java can interoperate. That is a good modernization case. That's not about offloading to zip or making it cheaper. That's actually using the right language for the right purpose. So I think that's one of the things that I'm most interested in of these AI-based features that vendors have, not just IBM, because it gives individuals the power to make it right.
Yeah, you want to find the right balance point, don't you? You don't want
to. After 50 years of it potentially running, the world has moved on, as Joe was saying. With all those other languages that we have Roland presenting on a regular basis for us. So I think that's a really good use case that perhaps in November, Joe, you can come and present in Whittlebury about some of those experiences. And one other point that Joe made was that I think inviting vendors in isn't just about they're going to sell something to you. They're also bringing with them those real world use cases, potentially missteps that a client has made and how they fixed it. So you're almost giving them the best practice as well, Joe, from talking to so many clients globally, that you're at least one step ahead of any of us that are just taking the product and seeing it for the first time. Okay, what do we do next? And are there any pitfalls that really should be avoided? So I think that's always the other advantage of bringing the vendor in, that you're almost bringing in a bit of consultancy.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's I totally agree with you. And I think for me, maybe I came at it from a different angle, because I just didn't want to present something that wasn't real. And I sort of looked at it from a pet project as, can I actually get this Java to run? Can I get it to interoperate with COBOL? And I'm very thankful I had Steve Foley, who's a Kix guru and also Java and Kix SME, who helped me out with this. But but yeah, that's the story I felt comfortable telling, and that's what I've built. I actually have got a slide I can knock up just to talk about flow, what we've put together. Just for context, if that helps.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if anybody else wants to be unmuted, just holler in the little chat.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think feel free to have an open conversation. So I just came back from a 2 or 3 days travel, so I wasn't even aware this in my diary. So let's have
I
a
actually logged in with somebody else's laptop with the screen upside down, and now you have to share a chart. This is good. This is
well,
good.
it is what it is, and if I can offer some wisdom,
No, it's good.
sharing something, that would be great. So let me just share my screen. I'll talk you through the flow, and then yeah, we can have an open conversation. I don't know if you can see that, but
Yeah, it looks good. You're still in edit mode. If you could do presentation mode, it might be a little bit bigger.
okay. So
Whatever the start, just the start screen show. Otherwise, it's pretty good.
Right, let's try that one again. Does that work? Or won't let me come out of edit mode.
No worries. Just go for it. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Got a weird sort of pink hue over the screen, but I'm sure you guys can see it. Yeah, so what we did, again, I would love to have shown it to you. I'm hoping to come to this agree, although it's my birthday that week, so I need to think about that one.
Oh, that's better. You're in presentation mode now. Okay.
Okay.
Cool. So we can see you full screen.
Right. So as I said, I don't know. I have a weird moral principle that I live by. I don't like to mislead clients with things that I don't personally believe in. Gets me in trouble sometimes. But
I don't think that's weird, Joe. I think that's actually quite refreshing.
okay. So I have a tendency where if I'm not saying IBM was anything in life, if I'm being told to do something, if I don't believe in it, I have to change it to something that I think is real and something I feel tech sellers and our customers will benefit from. Being in a worldwide role means I have to, if I don't become that quality gate, then I don't want tech sellers to suffer, and I also want clients to suffer, who I'm sure many of you on the call are clients. So I had this idea, and luckily I had Steve Foley, who was who jumped on the bandwagon with me. Is I put this ticket together where I have a business user who has stated that the postcode logic needs additional validation for the EU in the function. So I don't know if you guys know GenApp, General Insurance Application, but basically I extended that to do postcode validation, and in that postcode validation, it was checking for things like UK, Denmark, US, 2-character postcode values. And the postcodes are not 2 characters, but it's just part of the story. And then now we want to add EU, right?
So JTA, just for background,
sure.
to my understanding of GenApp, it's a Kix COBOL application. It's shipped with Kix, so every customer has it. You just have to install the group, and it has a 3270 BMS map transaction that lets you edit basically an address book that's held in vSAN. Is that correct?
That is exactly it.
Yeah, I knew it was correct. I was just kind of reading. Okay, brilliant. So that's your sort of as is, and it's a very cranky. It's a very old school application. You basically say, I want to inquire on transaction number 1 and edit it. You can do things like phone numbers and addresses, but there's basically squiddly squat validation. This is great. So you want to put some validation, and you're putting some validation in the 3270 application.
Well, yeah. So there's loads of things actually. I'll put my camera on now, so it's not upside down.
Okay.
So the application is very simple, like a little bit too simple. So I extended it to do a postcode validation, and I also extended it to a fraud check with our
Nice.
esteemed colleague, Steve Foley. And the fraud check actually calls out to Java, and then it validates that the telephone number is correct. I think it's just sort of making that, but it's just adding a bit more logic. So the story here is the customer is already using COBOL Kick's interoperability with Java to do the fraud check, and they now have identified a function that needs to be implemented, well, that is already in COBOL, that needs to be, a new function needs to be added to that logic, the postcode logic. But the technical architect has stated, well, wait a second, actually, this postcode logic is better suited in Java.
That's awesome. If you've won, I actually have Gen app running, but I have the old Gen app. I don't know if you.
Well, it is a different. We made some significant changes, but
yeah, no, I was just wondering, but yeah,
but the story there is that they've identified that function is better suited in Java. So don't make the change in COBOL. Let's transform it to Java. So this is the steps of the demo asset, and try to make it a bit fun with COBOL dude, Java dude on the left. I actually used AI to simulate the two roles, but the key message here is that a COBOL developer and a Java developer need to work together to enable this whole transformation and code change to work. And this is why I think, I don't know who mentioned it about skills. I'm not a big fan of the skills argument, because you still need to work together. You still need a COBOL dude, you still need a Java dude to work together. So I don't think there'll ever be a time when you can just, it's all over to Java now, forget everyone else, right? Or forget the COBOL developers. It should be a collaboration. So to implement that new EU function in the postcode logic, but transform it into Java before you add the new EU function, is we go through this elaborate end-to-end demo. I say elaborate, it takes about 45 minutes, and we take you from code all the way through to deployment. And we've got Serverless Connect APIs as well to trigger the application. So the top left here is the first thing we do, I'm going to zoom in on here, is that COBOL dude would refactor the postcode logic into a separate program. So let's say we had a program that's like, I don't know, 500 lines long, right? Whatever. But we want to isolate that postcode function so that we can then transform that to Java. So we literally, using the What's Encoded system refactoring system capability, we take that logic out and put it into a separate COBOL program. All right. Is everyone still with me?
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. Yes.
Good. So when we do that, now it's in its separate COBOL program. Now we've sort of isolated that function to now be transformed into Java. So we transform it into Java using What's Code Assistant, the transform capability, and then the COBOL dude has done his job. So all he had to do from a tooling perspective to execute this practice is he used VS Code, he used Git, he used What's Code Assistant, refactor and transform. Right? Very simple.
So, Joe, I'm going to ask you a question. It's not one to trip you up or anything, but you just said it's the end of COBOL dude's role. Actually, isn't COBOL dude going to have to help write the test case because it's going to behave differently, or because it's still starting at the same start point? You know, whether that's a kick screen or something. Is it just the expected result before and after are going to be the same? Is it as simple as that?
I love the question, Stuart. So what I hear what you're saying. So what we did is I built a regression test into the pipeline. So when we deploy, we're running a regression test to validate that the transaction is still performing as it's supposed to be, but after we did the Java component. There is an argument though that since we've changed the main COBOL program, that you might want to update the unit test case, right? There was an argument for that as well. Yeah, we didn't quite get to that part there. Something I'm looking at, funny enough, today. Looking at, was it today? No, it's probably tomorrow in my time. But that is something we look at next. Is how can we then update the unit test case if I essentially componentize that main program, and then the regression test, I'm doing some things to improve that later on as well. So, but that's a good point. I'll tell you. That's a good point.
Yeah, because I think that's another beauty about being able to refactor code, that you can break it down in, with the automated unit testing in mind as well. It's another benefit of modernization, isn't it? Of refactoring code to make it more testable. So great.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. I know that's a good question, and feel free to ask questions even if you think we're going to trip you up. So then hand over to the Java developers, and this is the cool bit. This is the bit got a lot of help from my Kix resource, the Kix help, I should say, from Steve. So now we've got this Java program, and I can even show you the framework that we built to make it easier to call COBOL from Java. But now we've got this Java program. We now need to change it to running Kix. So we made some very minor changes in the Javas from the What's Code Assistant transform capability to ensure that when we deploy this Java using Kix bundles, it will run in Kix. So we make the changes, and then we build, because it's Java, we can do a Gradle build locally and then run the Java, and then deploy the Java in Kix and then run it to validate that we got the expected result. And we can do all of that without COBOL Kix calling Java. So I know it sounds a bit crazy, but it is possible. So we change the Java in Kix, we run a Gradle build. We then, using the Kix bundle API, because when you build the Java, it gets packaged into a Kix bundle. We then deploy that Kix bundle to the developer's dedicated Kix region, or the Kix region of developer. And then we use Galasta, which is a test framework that is used by the Kix team, funny enough. It's now open source. And that test framework will enable me to execute the Java program, which in Kix is just a program definition. And I will set up the calling interface to call that Java, which is using Kix containers and channels. Give it a postcode value, execute the Java, and I'll verify that I'm getting the right output from the Java, all using the Galasta framework. So you can see there we've got bracket, IBM, TAS. Galasta is actually a free capability, but you get support when you use the IBM Test Accelerator Z capability. But ultimately, that's what we built into that sort of Java developer experience. So I don't have to get the COBOL guy to have his Kix COBOL program to call my Java. I can test everything from a Java perspective in isolation in my own dedicated Kix region. If the Java developer has that. If not, then you can deploy it to a Kix region on a developer.
Joe, can I ask another question? Again, this is just a naive question, not trying to trip it up. Sure. Debuggers, do vendors have to update their debuggers to be able to, if I'm testing this through Kix, starting point of Kix, and I'm using, doesn't matter whether it's BMC code debug or IBM debugger or Intertest, does it just go blank when it hits the Java, or are those tools being updated to flip into something that shows what goes on?
That's a good question. So that's not something I want to look into doing that. I haven't done that. I can't see why it'd be a problem, because we've supported Java and Kix for donkey's years now.
Yeah.
But that would be an ideal scenario. It's not only am I just, let's say I deployed it and something went wrong. and I don't know, I gave the wrong data in the channel in the container, and something blew up. I want to be able to debug that. I'm sure the IBM debuggers will support that in kicks by the DTCM profiles, but I haven't. It's not something I've played with yet.
Okay. When Jay's finished his banana, you can go and wander around and find out for me.
No, nobody does. It's a bit confusing having two Joes on this call. That's why I use a nickname JTA. I don't know where you picked.
Oh yeah, JTA. That's one.
Yeah, you're cool with being that. Yeah, but
Thanks,
sometimes
Joe.
you can call me JRW if you want, which is. But yeah, so the IBM debug for z/OS does support the fact that you can point and shoot and go, you know, over into, and boom and it works. Disclosure, I've seen that being demoed by one person in the world, which is Bill Alexander, who wrote the code. I've never got it working myself. And quite a few people have come up to me in hallways and says, Bill, I've seen you've been doing that demo for the last 3 years and I've followed your steps and I've never got it working myself. So I imagine there's quite a lot of configuration to make it that slick.
Okay.
Oh, that sounds like a challenge though, Joe.
Yeah, but maybe we can invite Bill. And obviously this is supposed to be a vendor neutral conference, and you know other debuggers do exist.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, other vendors like know Broadcom and you know BMC, and presumably other people have them as well. Yeah, so.
Well, that sounds like a challenge. I might have to try and get it working now.
Yeah, we used to do an IDE shootout. Maybe that can be the next.
I
it can be the COBOL to Java debug shootout. Yeah.
Oh, I do love those days. Oh, good old days. I don't know if that's even a good idea to do IDE shootouts. I don't know.
Well, they were in vogue about five. Anyway, we can discuss this later. But yeah,
yeah, I do remember those. I remember thinking to myself, does that give the right impression to clients that we're competing? I guess from a standpoint, from the distance we are, but I think we all want the same goal. We want every mainframe shop to be modernized, you know, having an improved experience according to what they do. So if they have an IBM debug tool, then it makes sense to use the IBM ID. But anyway, I'll put up the tangent. But the key thing here is that as a Java developer, you're doing your building, you're doing your deployment, you're doing your testing, all from the VS Code experience. We've even got the VS Code Kicks plugin working as well. But anyway, so when you've done that and you've got Java that's tested and runs in Kicks, I then built a pipeline, which funny enough got some interesting feedback. But the pipeline will take the Java. As soon as you check the Java into Git, so Git is the SVM, so when the correct term is Git push, it will trigger a pipeline which will take the Java to USS, run a Gradle build on Z, and then package that. Oh, it doesn't do the package process, it just does the build. I mean, we could run some Sonar checks, but it just does the build on ZOS to make sure the build works. Now, some will say, well, why did you do it on ZOS? You could have done it on x86. Well, I'm a big fan of wherever I'm running it, I want to build it on that system. So even though the developer could build it locally, I want to still validate it builds on Z, right? I'm sure people have different opinions, but that was just my view. Yep, so that's that. And then the next bit is now the COBOL developer. We go back to COBOL dude. And now what the COBOL developer does is that he's going to change the COBOL code to call Java. So a funny story about this. So I actually wrote the code to call Java from COBOL, and I found it quite tedious because, well, I wouldn't say tedious. I found it quite confusing because we were transforming about 15 lines of COBOL into Java, and then I had to write about with the working storage and everything. It was about 10 to 15 lines of COBOL code to call the Java, and I just thought, no, there's something not right about that. And there's something, I know we should trust our developers to do that, but there must be a way to simplify that. So what Steve and I did was, and this was mainly Steve's bit of work here because he's been doing COBOL development much longer me, who doesn't have gray hair yet. But he did an amazing thing where he created this framework where we just call the COBOL, the Java program, using 4 lines. So it's a call statement, passing the variable, which would be the postcode variable, passing the variable, which would be the output variable from the Java. I don't know if it's past the length, I can't remember if it's past the length, but, and then this framework would automatically call the Java, creates the containers, creates channels, and then using another part of the framework in Java, the Java sending the information back to the COBOL will create channels and containers, put the data into that, and then when the control gets passed back to the COBOL program will retrieve the information, which would be postcode valid or invalid, and then the COBOL program will continue its logic. I mean, I would love to show you the code if you really want to get geeky about it. I can even show you what the framework looks like. But yeah, that's what we built. So it made it easier for the developer experience. So he would show change in that code, and then we go for the pipeline. But this is now the mainframe pipeline, which is just, again, a developer or feature branch level pipeline, which is just compiling, sending the COBOL program to USS, doing an actual COBOL 6.4 compile, link edit, telling the developer it passed or failed, and then Bob's your uncle. Now, what we then do, and by the way, if there's any questions, just interrupt me. What we then did, we now did a final a merge request. So we're merging the feature branch, and we merged the COBOL branch into the main branch for each, because we've got 2 repositories. One holds the COBOL, one holds the Java. And when we do the merge, we do another pipeline, and I'm sorry for those who don't understand Git on the call, but just go with me for now. We merged, that will trigger a pipeline to then build the Java again, but then package the Java executable, which is in the form of a Kix bundle, which is just a grouping of runtime assets for Kix, but in this case, just had Java. And we store that in a tool called DevOps Deploy, which is formerly known as Urban Code Deploy. I'm sure there's other vendors out there that have their own tools as well, deployment, just to be very, not so IBM centric here. But so that happened for the Java piece, but also happened for the COBOL piece. So we've got these 2 runtime artifacts that need to be deployed together. So then this is where we do the release process, where I would run this process now to deploy up the route to live, or the path to live. And this is the beautiful bit. This is where the magic happens for me. I mean, I love this bit. Partly because obviously I spent a lot of time doing this, but I've been doing this for a while now, automate deployment tools. But this is where it takes the COBOL executable, it moves it into the Kix load library, does the phase in, or I think we did new copy, does the DB2 bind. What else did I put into the process? I can't remember what else that was it. And then we do the Java piece, where we then deploy the Java to the USS, the Kix bundle directory. We then disable and discard the existing bundle if it exists, and then we install it. And once we've done both the backend, well, they're both backends for free, but once we do the COBOL and the Java piece, we then do a regression test to validate via the ZOS Connect API that the transaction is still behaving as it should, right? So, I mean, the regression test is fairly rudimental at the moment. It's just a curl test, which I'm looking to improve with some of our test automation tools. But the key is that it's all part of the automated pipeline. So if anything went wrong, it would flag up and say pipeline problem, and send me a work item or ticket to the release manager and say, hey, something went wrong here. And then, we would have to relook at our development, go back to creating a branch, or go back to our existing branches and fix that. But it's all automated. The whole process is automated. And then the beautiful thing is, if it does pass the test, then we label those packages, the COBOL and the Java package, as test successful, so that when we do now deploy from dev to test, or dev to QA, or wherever, then test to production or pre-production, etc., you can see that this package was tested and passed. So that's an asset that we built. And the last thing I want to talk about, actually, well, let me just pause for any questions on that, because I think that could be quite, without seeing it live, it can be a bit much to take in from just one slide. But any questions on what I just covered there?
That's pretty cool, actually. So I do like the fact, so you're able to do the compile it, the COBOL, get the COBOL load module in the load library,
Yep.
do the new copy phase in. So you basically make it hot effectively for the Kix COBOL. But at the same time, you're able to do all the packaging, because Java bundles are fiddly, right? Because you have a resource in Kix, the bundle that has to be kind of like stopped, effectively halted. Then you have that points to a USS directory that I think has a zip file. So all of that gubbins has got to be zipped up, popped over there. And then it's not like you can phase it in. You have to basically just shut it down. You have to effectively bounce it, don't you?
Yeah. Well, yeah, essentially it's a bounce, but you're disabling and discarding.
Yeah, you're disabling a yeah. Presumably that would then affect everybody else that was using it as well. So your test has to be quite isolated in terms of if anybody else was using any other artifacts in that same zip. So because COBOL is quite modular, isn't it? Because you can just put in a load library with like perhaps 500 members, you can just put in one load module and just recycle that one, and the rest of the world remains untouched. Whereas with Java, your zip for your bundle might contain those 500 programs effectively. It's not as fine, it's not as finessed. But that wouldn't matter in a test pipeline, though.
No, well, it's a very good point, actually. I'm glad you raised that, because in the COBOL program we had, I remember I told you we had that fraud check. The Java did a fraud check.
Right, yeah.
And then we now have this new Java. Initially, we had it all in one Kix bundle, which comes to your point, right? If you got one bundle and something changes, if you change one part, you might affect the other. And so what we decided to do is we have one Kix bundle per Java application. So we have one for the fraud check. I don't know if it's a good idea or not. That's just what we decided.
No, I love where you're going. I can kind of see where the end of the movie goes. So what you're saying is, as a result of this, so I've forgotten who I was talking to. I think it was Rob Stroud at RBS NatWest, and he said to me, we used to have one bundle. He called it a BFB, a big fat bundle. I think the F was meant for something else, but then they now have more fine-grained bundles for exact what you're doing. They're trying to compartmentalize the business logic and that sort of unit of work, very similar to the way that COBOL has done. So as a result of this, you're actually making there's a maturity life cycle going on the Java side as a kind of collateral damage for the refactoring, which is actual goodness, which is just goodness. For me, my background is I'm a Java developer before I ever became a COBOL developer. So I like having fine-grained Java, microservice Java, sort of logically built into how things have been physically packaged. So this is all goodness to me. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it was a good lesson. Yeah, it was a lesson learned for us, because we wanted to do all these different things. We're like, oh, does it make sense having two separate different functions of Java in the same bundle? And then we're doing on it with Steve.
Yeah, well, then you can get even more flash as well. I'm just nerding out on Java here because it's my kind of ace in my deck. Is that Java, you can version them independently as well. So because you've got different zip files, you could have a zip file in a directory called v1, v1.1, v1.2, completely independent. Your fraud detection is now completely independent to your postcode, which presumably is just running on a different life cycle for how gosh, what do they call it? The volatility of that change is going to be different. So and you can version them as well. So you can actually running multiple concurrent ones, and you've got real true isolations. Because bundles do support versioning as well.
Well, it's very interesting you say that, because I heard that, and when I was researching it, but I decided to not take that approach because DevOps deploy, or the tool we're using to deploy the packages, versions things. So I could have 10 Kix bundles, but I'm only going to deploy the 10th version. So I didn't want a version from the package and deployment manager, and then also version from the
Game set amounts to JTA. Yeah. So what I just described was version control on disk, which, as all of us know, is a bad thing. The version control should be done by the SCM, right? You should always be pushing the current version. Wow. Thanks, JTA, for calling me up there.
Well,
It's a very old school approach towards mainframe versioning, which is have all the artifacts hot on disk.
No, I don't.
What you're saying is you shouldn't. You should actually the pipeline should be doing that.
Yeah, but I don't want to say I called you out on it, because we actually discussed it, and it was a long talking topic.
Oh, okay.
Do we want a version at the Kix bundle level? And we were like, but wait a second. The DevOps deploy tool versions things for us. It's versions of the COBOL artifacts, versions of the Java. So we were like, well, does it make sense to do that? And in some cases, it might make sense to do that, but we just opted to take that approach.
No, it's a much more mature approach. It's more modern DevOps to do that. Yeah, just have a sort of slash current that's always, and then the pipeline just basically dumps in the right one there, and all of those artifacts. Yeah, it's all goodness. Wow, cool.
But one last slide. I don't know what time we have to do for time. And again, I would love to show you this. And, but we was thinking about this and said, well, is there what's the reasons why a client would do this, right? What's the sort of mindset do they have to be in? And this is slightly sort of nudging the clients to think along this road. If you're going to look at this, is the first fact was in this story was that the client wants to make changes to application functions that are in the most suitable language on Z, not just COBOL. So you have to have that mindset of, I want to choose the best language for the change I'm making. The second is there needs to be some determination, some sort of evaluation process, whether that's done by a technical architect or the developer, to understand whether a function is better suited for Java or not. Right, and obviously you have to have zip capacity if you want to leverage that. And the third was, what's this one? So some business logic better suited for Java is already implemented in COBOL. Yeah. So then you also want to have a capability to migrate the COBOL to Java, right? You can rewrite it if you want, but this is where the What's Code System transform capability comes into play in a nice story that at least I feel makes sense. And we can do a lot of that transformation for you, right, using What's Code System. I don't know. I've got a pop up on my screen, which means I can't even see.
Actually, Joe, we are over time. So if you're happy to share the deck on the GSE agenda, that would be useful for attendees. And I will just throw it open if anyone's got any questions they wanted to ask. Not seeing anything in the chat at the moment. Okay, so Joe, I think that was a worthwhile session. Thank you very much, and to Joe W for moderating it with some content. Fantastic. So thank you, everyone. And next sessions start at 11:15 on the sessions for GS UK. You can leave feedback for Joe Taff Atkins on the website via the agenda. So thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Jizzle.
Yeah, JTA, you smashed it. Yeah, well done. Yeah.
In
a good way. That's a good smash. Yeah.
Jizzle.
Cheers.